Okay, so here's the presentation outline for today. I'm going to talk a little bit about background and compare physical security to computing security. I think that would give a good connection of how stuff works in the computing world. We're going to focus in on intrusion detection systems. I'll give you a definition, a little bit of background on it, a little brief history on how they came into computing. We'll talk about the different types of intrusion detection systems. And then as a little bit of a motivational tool, I'm going to show you the example of a worm that took place in 2001, which spread very rapidly. And that was kind of the motivation behind the original work, original research. We'll talk about the current system that we built on, which was Dr. Kim's research. And we'll talk about the experiment, how we computed some trend changes, and show you some of the results that we came up with. So when we think of physical security, it can be broken down into 4 areas. And when I'm talking about physical security, I'm talking about keeping your house safe, or keeping your vehicle safe. The physical security model breaks down into 4 components. There's the deterrence component. You can think of those as like a warning sign or fences or lighting. You kind of want to deter anybody from taking what you've got. You've got access control. So maybe you have a door with a lock or a couple of locks on it. That's what we call the access control portion. You got the detection portion. Let's say somebody gets through that door, and you want to know about it. So just like a car alarm would go off, that's the alarm for the detection portion. And then you've got the identification. And you think of this as maybe video monitoring or analysis. So maybe a security guard looking at video monitors, and he sees what's going on in a certain area. So the way that connects to computing, for deterrence, we're pretty much just regulated to laws. That's the main aspect of security in the computing world, is we rely on criminal and civil laws to deter people from accessing systems that they shouldn't be accessing. But in the event that that deterrence doesn't work, we rely on firewalls. What firewalls are, they're a device that can sit on a network, and they basically take a look at the traffic that's coming in. It says, yes, that traffic's allowed to come through, or no, that traffic's not allowed to come through. That's kind of a very rudimentary way of explaining that. And this is where intrusion detection systems come in this third phase. So just like alarms, an intrusion detection system in a computer network or on a computer system is the alarm. It says, hey, something is going on, and it also helps to identify it. So intrusion detection systems fall into these 2 categories in the physical security network. So what is an IDS? Basically, it's just a device. And when we say device, it can be either physical hardware or it can be software. Many of you probably have some type of antivirus system installed on your laptops or your work systems. That's a form of an intrusion detection system. And it does these 5 things here. Basically, it will monitor users and monitor the systems, make sure everything's acting appropriately. Some intrusion detection systems will look for vulnerabilities in your system and say, hey, you've got a hole here, you need to fix it. They're also used to recognize known attacks. So say there's a very common attack that happens, and it sees something that triggers, that's following that same trend, and says, hey, this is a known attack. And this is called a signature-based, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Anomaly-based is where it says something is out of the norm here. We don't know what it is, but something odd is going on, and it'll alert the user or the system administrators. And this one I find pretty interesting because most people don't think about it. Some intrusion detection systems will actually set up traps because they want to see who's trying to probe their networks, and you want to collect information about those people that are probing their networks. And then in the computing world, we call these honeypots. So if a honeypot collects bees, that's the whole honeypot. So a little history about intrusion detection systems in the computing world. In 1980, an author by the name of James Anderson wrote this paper called the Computer Security Threat Monitoring and Surveillance. And he was kind of the first guy to say, hey, we need to really think about security and computing systems on a broader scale. Instead of just thinking about what's going on my system, or what might be going on a different system. We're all hooked together. We kind of need to be working in tandem. That's kind of where the idea of intrusion detection came from. 3 years later, SRI International launched a project. It was a government project to try and fingerprint the profile of the users on the system. So they were trying to look at traffic on their network and see if there were some common trends. Around the same time, Dr. Dorothy Denning, she came out with the first real comprehensive model of intrusion detection systems. And these things kind of happened in tandem about the same time. Just a year later, Siri actually developed a whole method of tracking users and tracking traffic, and they deployed it on ARPANET, which was what we now know as the internet. But ARPANET was originally a government and university network. Probably several of you are familiar with it, familiar how it came about. After '84, this is where things started to take off in the computer security world. In '88, Haystack project was developed at the UC Davis at the Lawrence Livermore Labs, and it was a project specifically for the Air Force. And what they were trying to do was, hey, we now are tracking how people are using their systems. When something goes wrong or something abnormal happens, and it's an attack, it seems to follow these same types of trends. So why don't we keep track of these trends, and when they happen, we know that this virus or this worm is attacking us, and that's where the Haystack project came about. So they were saying, we know what attacks look like, here's how we can identify a very specific attack that's happening to us. And the way that this name came about, I thought was kind of interesting. One of the employees was trying to describe to the reporter how it worked. He says, think about, and the employee was saying, we have a whole bunch of data sitting around, and we're trying to find a very specific sequence of data in this set. So it's kind of like looking for a needle in a haystack. So that's where the name of that project came. Soon after that was released, several of the researchers at the Livermore Labs left and went and formed their own company. We call it Haystack Labs. And that's where they started looking at pattern matching more in depth. And then shortly after that, the commercial world just exploded with all different types of systems and ideas. And that's where industry really got involved. So, intrusion detection systems. There are generally two types of intrusion detection systems, and we can think of them these ways. Like I said previously, there's a signature-based system. This is looking for specific patterns and matching to those specific patterns. And the other system is the anomaly-based system, which is where our research is in, and it looks for something that's out of the norm. So again, we've got a trend that we know that this is the traffic that is what it looks like on this network. When something starts to change, something's not acting appropriately, we call that anomaly. We're going to talk a little bit more about those later. Both of these systems can happen in real time or after the fact. Usually real time. Nowadays, there's not too much of a performance hit doing real-time analysis, but you really get your most detailed analysis from after the fact. You're really parsing through it and looking for very specific conditions. And there's two forms of intrusion detection systems. Excuse me. We've got network-based systems, which look at a whole series of computers, a whole series of network traffic. Network traffic and try to decide, what's going on there. And you've got your very specific host-based ones, which is very similar, like I said, to the antivirus programs that you might have installed on your system. So it's only looking at what's going on. Signature-based systems can be broken down into two categories. Those that look for very specific attack sequences or patterns, or those that look for attacks to specific areas of a network or specific areas of a system. In this case, maybe we know that this specific type of attack was always going to look for, like on a Unix system, maybe trying to look at the password folder or the password file, just trying to grab information. In a network, it may look in two different places. It may look in the lower layer packets, and it'll look at the IP packets or the TCP or UDP packets. Again, this may be a little more information than you're used to. But the idea is that in the network, it's very similar to what happens in host-based systems. It also looks at application layer protocols. And protocol is how a computer or an application, I should say, will talk to another application on another computer. There's a very specific attack in the late 90s called Windu that exploited a specific TCP port by sending out-of-bounds data. And what out-of-bounds data is it's just an identification to the receiving client that the data you're getting is very important, pay attention to it. So it's kind of like I won't call it a priority system because it doesn't get there any faster. It's just when the client receives it, it says, hey, I've got something that's important, I need to really pay attention to this. Well, Windu exploited that and caused blue screens of death in a lot of Windows machines. So, some of the advantages of signature-based systems, they have very low false alarm rates. And that's because it knows what it's looking for. It knows exactly what it's trying to find. So the false alarm rates are almost non-existent. Typically very low impact to the system because, again, the algorithms are pretty simple. So we don't need to do a lot of what ifs, what's going on, what might be happening, type thing. We know if we see something, yeah, this is what's happening. Some of the disadvantages, this is the big major one, is it's only limited to known attacks. So if there's a new attack that hits the wild, it doesn't know how to deal with that and may not recognize it. Also, because of attacks are constantly being introduced, they need to be updated. The systems need to be updated frequently. There's a lot of maintenance involved with that. So anomaly-based systems. This is kind of the meat of, again, where this research, what we're working on. So anomaly-based systems, they work initially by looking at what's going on with the user, with systems, with networks, different devices, and they try to create a profile. And we call these like a fingerprint. This is what this traffic will look like. This is what this is how this system is going to act inside the network. And then when events happen, it might be outside, they're compared, or flagged and said, hey, these are kind of suspicious. Some of the advantages of anomaly-based, because it's not looking for a specific attack, it can find new attacks relatively easy. It doesn't need to know what the attack is made up of or what it's trying to do. You just know that, hey, something is happening that's different, and it's not so much dependent on the operating environment. You just say, hey, we know what the environment is made up of, this is what's happening. Some of the disadvantages, though, you get a lot of false alarm rates, quite often. That can be a good thing. Sometimes you want to have a very tight system that says, hey, something's going on, instead of something that's very loose. It just lets everything through and says, oh, okay. Now something's happening, which might be too bad. The behaviors of the system can vary with time. And what that means is, let's say you have a network that's using a very specific program or applications on the network, and then something gets updated or changed, and all of a sudden the pattern changes. And when that happens, the system needs to be retrained. And this is something that we've talked about, haven't dealt with yet, but what happens if anomaly is introduced to the system at the same time as network traffic changes, and that gets fingerprinted as being the normal. So just something to think about. So here's kind of the motivation behind the research, or the example of the motivation behind the research. Has anybody in here heard of the code red worm? Probably the second most destructive worm.
11 years ago. So.
Yeah, 11 years ago, but I'll show some information on the next page. But I think there's only one other worm that did more damage, and that was the love bug worm. A year prior to this, so far that we know of. So this appeared in 2001. It exploited Microsoft's IIS web servers. And basically what it did was all the pages that were served on those web servers, it changed everything and just put up this text that said hacked by Chinese. It's kind of an interesting worm, the way it worked. About the first 2/3 of the month, it just propagated itself. It just sent itself all out on the network to everywhere that it could get to. And then for a fixed set of days, for about the next 7 days, all the infected servers would attack one particular location or a fixed set of IPs and try and what we call a denial of service attack, or in this case, a distributed denial of service attack. So you've got things from where we're trying to shut down very specific hosts or very specific locations.
What is DOS or DDoS?
DOS is a denial of service attack, and the DDoS is a distributed denial of service. So DOS typically is from point to point. Distributed means many points to one point. And then after the 27th, on day 28, it would go inactive, cannot do anything. And then at the start of the next month, it will start spreading itself again, and won't go away. So, on July 19th, this is analysis of just a few days after this hit. They found 359,000 hosts infected worldwide. At the peak rate of this worm, it was hitting 2,000 hosts per minute and infecting 2,000 hosts per minute. That's crazy. Computer Economics calculated that it did about $2.6 billion worth of damage to the industry. And it was rated 2.99 on their index. Like I said, I think love bug worm was a little high, well, actually a lot higher. It's the only higher one, but it rated around 10 on the index. So the higher you go, the worse it is. And overall, over 1 million hosts were affected. And there was several variants. I think there was one major variant of code red that came out, and several other variants that also hit the wild right around the same time. Here's an example of a time-elapsed picture of how this happened.
So far, Alaska is okay.
Here, you're going to see all of a sudden it's just going to take off.
These are infected hosts?
Yeah, infected hosts in the location. And then you're going to see. I feel like the CDC here, and I'm showing how virus spreads all over the world. But that's basically what it looked like after when they overlaid it on a map how it was affected. And down here you can see the timeline. It shows the number of victims. If you watch this number, it just explodes all at once. And a lot of that has to do with, if you look at the time, this is when the U.S. was coming online, people were coming to work and coming on the services. It just went crazy. Okay, so
you're only talking about statically defined viruses. It's not a virus that morphs over time. So if there is a variant, the variant is statically programmed and then released.
Yeah, there's a couple. There are viruses out there that will morph themselves as they propagate. Those are some of the more complex ones. But yeah, this is an example of a very statically defined virus that went out there. Somebody got a hold of it and said, oh, we can maybe change a couple things around, and then they re-released it back out.
But the scope of your research is the statically defined viruses.
The scope of our research is anomaly-based systems. Where we don't care what the virus is. We just want to say, hey, something is going on. Okay. What do we do with our network when something happens?
So you're looking at network traffic, but looking at computers as black boxes. Data goes in, data comes out. I don't care what it does in that.
Yes, computer. Exactly. So the original idea was, how do we model normal behavior? This was Dr. Kim's research that led up to what we're going to be talking about here, more about here. He said, hey, how do we, for anomaly-based systems, how do we say what is normal traffic? And what happens if that behavior changes? His goals were, we wanted to detect these changes dynamically. So change could happen. We want to be able to say, hey, there's a change here, there's a change here. It also needs, what's important to note is that anomaly-based systems on their own don't work. Signature-based systems on their own don't work. You really need a coupling of both of those types of systems in order to have a very comprehensive security for your network or your system. So it should be part of an overall detection scheme. And another important aspect that he was looking at is we want to be able to self-tune it, so that if the model changes, that the system will automatically do it. You don't need to have users who are saying something changed, let's rewrite the algorithm, let's rewrite the parameters. Not something that's going to kind of go with the flow. So his current system that he had developed he called it the detector. And basically the idea was, in the hardware form, There's going to be like a black box sitting at the network edge. And it will kind of classify the traffic that came in using what's called a byte frequency distribution. And what byte frequency distribution is it's a way to look at the payload of the data and come up with a numerical value for it. Say the payload was cat, right? A byte frequency distribution will look at C, give it a number, look at A, give it a number, look at T, and give it a number. And there's only 256 different possible numbers that could happen. So look at the average frequencies, take the payload, break it down, come up with average sets of frequencies. You build a standard deviation around those frequencies and say, this is my threshold. Anything that comes outside of this is an anomaly. Doesn't mean it's an attack, just means it's an anomaly.
Does that get screwed up by encryption schemes?
No. Because even if it's encrypted, you still have a value when it gets torn apart. Depends on where you're encrypting at, but it shouldn't get affected by encryption schemes.
I'm not encrypting the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. The whole idea is you're looking
but those can also vary with
distribution
time.
of.
Yeah, you're just looking at a distribution of values.
But like an SSH tunnel with certain kind of encryption on top of it versus a different one with a different kind of encryption and so on. You have to get a lot of that data to ever pull statistics out of that. So I wonder how a real-time could ever detect that.
Yeah, and those are some of the hang-ups in trying to develop the system. But that's a very good point. But the whole idea is even if you're SSH, it's still data that's coming across.
Right.
CAT might be jumbled up. I use CAT as an example because it's something we can relate to. But it might be nonsense just jumbled up. But we're going to see nonsense that's just jumbled up pretty regularly if everything.
But the anomaly then sort of depends on the fact that spreading or broadcasting is a part of the planned behavior of the attack, right?
Right.
Yeah, if it really doesn't care about spreading, if it's really aimed at one machine, all it's going to do is sit there and screw with things.
Right.
Then you may not see it because it's the repetitiveness of sort of broadcasting itself that this detects.
Right, but the idea is that now all of a sudden we've got this traffic, the attack, let's say, is traffic that's outside of the norm. So you're going to see a lot of scores above this threshold saying, hey, this is an attack. Or say this is an anomaly. Then the system has to determine, well, wait a minute, is the anomaly, I got a slide coming up on this in a second, is the anomaly a trend change? Is it just normal traffic changing? Is it an attack? Is it a false positive? Is it something the system doesn't really, the intrusion detection system doesn't know how to handle? It's not just cut and dry saying, this was just the first step, just trying to detect what's going on in a set of traffic. How do we get a fingerprint from it? Say this is normal traffic. If we inject new stuff into it, how do the scores change? When we inject new stuff into it, scores jump above the threshold, which is the standard deviation. So then we know something is going on. Don't know what. And that's basically what this is. So all of this creates the fingerprint. Then as new packets come into the system, they're scored and they're checked against the fingerprint.
So your discretized per packets.
Yes. Okay, so there are, like I was just saying, this is the next slide. Anomalies can come in 3 different flavors. They can be attacks, false positives, or trend changes. And that's where this research comes in. And what we're saying is that we need to isolate what is a valid trend change before we can start saying we've got attacks or we've got false positives going on. If we can reliably find a change in a normal change in data, and we can flexibly tune the system, then we can start saying anything above the threshold, because we've retuned, the threshold's going to change as well. Things that start appearing above that are going to could probably be attacks or false positives. But again, this research is just how do we find a trend, a new trend in data. Okay, so we kind of broke. We're running out of time. I got several more slides to get through, so I'm going to speed this up. When we looked at trend changes, well, actually, I should say, when we plotted all these scores that were coming out of something, we plotted them, per pack as the packets were coming in, and we're looking at scores. And I said to Dr. Kintner, it kind of looks like financial data. if you look at, the stock market, if you follow a particular index or a stock, you've got sometimes you have a lot of crazy stuff going on. So I wonder if we could use some tools that's used in the financial markets, some statistical analysis tools, to try and see if we can predict, see if there's a new trend, and you've broken out of a trend. If you're familiar with financial markets, one of them is, you've got the price of a stock crosses the moving average. That's one of the big indicators that there's a new move going on. It's not an exact method, it's not a very good method, but it's one of the ways. So I looked at this data and I said, what if we throw some stuff at this, we could come up with something interesting, and we did. So the whole system, computing these trend changes, is based on two different parts. Something we call the predictor, and then we want to be able to validate that prediction to make sure that it's correct. So the predictor is just an algorithmic next guess. All right, so we have a set of data, and we're saying, if you think the next packet score that comes in is going to be this. One of the tools we use was just linear regression, and I'm sure everybody here is probably familiar with that, but it's just linear regression is just a best fit straight line that says, hey, what is the next point likely to be? This statistical analysis tool is very reactive to changing data, so it's very quick. If something changes, linear regression will keep adjusting based on that. One of the other tools we looked at was exponential moving average. And what exponential moving average does, just a weighted moving average, meaning that newer scores are weighted higher than the older scores. We didn't want that, though. We wanted to make sure that the trend gave time to develop, so we reversed that. We gave higher scores, we reversed it, but weighted the older scores more, and then the newer scores less. So that way, little micro trends that were going on didn't bounce the trigger or the predictor out of alignment. And like I said, that allowed the trends to fully develop and easily in combination. And we'll get into more about the trigger line here in a second. So once we've got a logical next guess, we need to validate that somehow. We need to say, hey, we've got a guess. Then the score comes in. We need to somehow say, was our guess pretty close or was it way off? And we just use good old-fashioned correlation index. This is our guess. This is what came in. We evaluated the score that linear regression predicted would be. We know that when you have a group of numbers that completely correlate, you get a value of 1. When there's no correlation whatsoever, you get a value of 0. Interesting, we were expecting to see stuff very high, close to 1, with correlation that, hey, yeah, something's going on. But that ended up not being the case. We only needed to see a simple rise in correlation to say, hey, there's a trend. That became our trigger. That just became our trigger. Later on, we would validate that trigger to see if it was correct. But we wanted something that was very fast and very quick, so we just simply looked for a rise in correlation. Okay, we might have a trend change. Later on, the validation would say, yes, we did or didn't. And then we use standard deviation with REMA, so we just took the bound on REMA, specifically the upper bound, because we have a threshold, scores go up, something's going on. If we went above that bound, we'd say it was probably an anomaly or attack. But if it stayed between the standard deviation bound and the reverse exponential moving average, if we saw a lot of traffic starting in this area, we start to say, oh, that's probably a change in regular traffic, because it wasn't hitting the threshold. It was just something that was above what was normal, below the threshold.
How many bytes are in the packet?
Depends on
the protocol.
Yeah, protocols and
So
where in the
what order of magnitude are we talking?
thousands and thousands of packets. When we get to the experiment results, you'll see we were actually picking up trend changes within 90 packets, which was very good. You're actually quite surprised to be able to pick that up. But that all gets into the next steps of how big our linear regression windows were, and how big our moving average window was. So we started playing with those parameters to see if there was some set. Interesting. The thing to note, though, is that the combination of these window sizes won't matter, or they're probably specific to this system. The idea is that you can tune these for a different system. So it's you're going to try to tune it to your system, deploy it, and then the system will react to it. But what you might have in your system might be different from what you have in your system, and his settings are not going to work with you. You have to find those settings and then let it go.
Are you continuously collecting statistics while you are? So how are you avoiding a drift?
A drift in
A small change over time that will put you into all of a sudden different fingerprint, but you did not recognize it because it changed way over time.
That's a very good question. We actually did experiments on several different sets of data. One with a very sharp change, like we talked about. Something changed relatively quickly in the network, and there's a new pattern. And then we also introduced a change very, very gradually to see if the triggers and the predictors would still happen. And when they did, it would self-tune. And if it kept going, that's fine. It would catch it again and self-tune again. So that was the idea, to try and make sure that it worked in both types of systems. That's one question. So the algorithm for the system and the parameters are kind of made up of these two things. We combine the predictors and validators, and we come up with what we call a trigger line. And then we come up with another line later on that confirms the trigger. Yes, this was a change. Go ahead, and the confirmation line would be the point where we say, okay, let's retune the system based on this new traffic that's coming in. Again, I already talked about this. The trigger line is it's very simple. We just basically looked at how reactive the linear regression was. As long as there was a correlation between the predicted score and the actual score, as soon as there was a rise, we said, okay, let's trigger. We want it to be very fast. We're not so much worried about what the value is. It could be a very low correlation, just as long as it was a rising number. We said, yep, this is a trigger. Let's see what happens, X number of packets away, and see if we're still moving in that direction. And then the second part is the confirmation line. It's made up of two parts. It's a percentage of the rising correlation. And the reason that we did a percentage is we don't want to look for successive rises and all of a sudden something drops and then it comes back up as soon as a pattern. So we want to look at a group of rising scores or values and say, is 90% of the packets that came after the trigger line, are they acting like we thought they would act? Then yeah, so that was one part of the confirmation. The next part was, like I talked about earlier, was to specifically look at where those scores landed. Did they land above the standard deviation bound, or did they land below it, but above REMA? So probably something to clarify, a score, if it is not normal, will always rise. That's what comes out of the detector. The higher the score, the more abnormal the packet is. Okay? Scores will never come down, so it's not quite like financial data where you have stuff that rises and falls. You have stuff that kind of travels along, and then there's something odd that's going to start traveling upwards because the scores don't match. So for the experiment, ladies and gentlemen, we actually set up two types of experiments. We looked at immediate change, which we consider to be the most extreme situation. With the human eye, you can look at the chart and go, oh yeah, something changed right there. And then we also did a gradual change where we introduced, we took two streams of data and introduced one stream into the other just gradually to kind of change the fingerprint. A little more difficult to observe and to catch. We wanted to make sure that this algorithm would work in both scenarios. We used variable size windows. Again, linear regression is based on a set size, so we changed that window size. Same thing with the exponential moving average or the REMA. We did the same thing. So for the experiment, we broke it down into 4 modes. We looked at large and small regression window sizes with large and small REMA window sizes. And something to note, in all of these scenarios, all these combinations, large regression with small REMA, you can get a trigger and confirmation. There's no doubt that you'll probably see something. It's how quickly, how fast does it isolate? What combinations with this traffic work best? And so I'm not going to go into the specific quantitative numbers because, again, it's going to depend on your traffic or what's going on that particular network. But just to show that qualitatively these things could be adjusted and you can find a set that's going to work well. All right, so here's the meat of all of this. So these are first experiment. We use a small moving average with a small linear regression window size. On the left, we have a sharp change in data. On the right, we have the gradual change. Two graphs in each set. Top graph on the left here, this represents the score of the packet. On the horizontal axis, we've got the packet number. The gray dots represent that actual score of that packet number at that location. Okay, so the light gray dots is what makes up how, when plotted, the score versus the packet number, how it looks over time. So this is a packet comes in, a packet comes in, a packet comes in, a packet. You follow that?
And the score is determined by your anomalous algorithm. I mean, you give a score to a packet.
That comes out of the detector.
Scored by your detector.
Yeah, so the detector spits out a score. Then the predictor and validator then come up with these lines, and then we come up with these trigger lines and confirmation lines. So I'll keep explaining because there's a lot of stuff going on here. Okay, so this top part is all about what's going on with the packets, or how the packets are scored. This bottom part is how the regression, or the correlation of the predicted score, right? So we can see that there's bouncing ups, that the correlation is moving up. So in here, we can see that from 0 to 1, these are our dollars. Okay, so and this is probably, might be hard to make out. REMA is the larger dotted or dashed line, green line. So REMA would be this line here. This is when plotted on the graph, this is what REMA would look like. So you can see that it took a while for REMA to react to the sharp change, which was expected because we're weighting all this stuff over here as being the most important. The standard deviation for REMA is a slightly more dashed green line, and that would be this guy here. Okay? So the standard deviation change. So like I was talking about, we see traffic in here above REMA, and we don't hardly see anything below here. We may have a trend change, but that's only one part of the algorithm. Linear regression is this blue line here. You see all of a sudden there was a change in traffic, and linear regression just changed dramatically. It's a very fast reacting trigger and shot up. And red is the threshold that comes out of the detector. The detector says this network or this set of packets we shouldn't see anything above 0.28 for a score. If we do, that could be an anomaly or something's going on. Unfortunately, in the sharp change, it's going to be immediate, so it's easy to see. So we get a blue trigger line here with an ascending. This was, I should say, if we were to actually plot all the trigger lines, you would see a bunch of trigger lines here all over the place because we've got a little bit of rising, a little bit of rising, a little bit of rising. Again, that's all we were looking for, is just a trigger. This is the trigger line that actually was validated by this confirmation line. Okay? The confirmation line is the part that makes up, hey, do we have stuff that's above the standard deviation? Yeah, and is the regression, the linear regression, is it tracking and is it increasing successively? So we see that, oh yeah, there's little dips here. If we did it in completely successive correlation, that dip would have shut it down and said, oh, there was a dip. So that's why we take a percentage in this window, in this size, and say, hey, how many of these were actually rising? Oh, so there's a change. So that's how it works on here, on the sharp change. On the gradual change, this is where we introduce data, two different sets of data, 20%, and we've introduced 30% more data, merged it with the initial set, and we can see that stuff is just all over the place. But there's no real identifiable change going on here. And that's why we need to rely on the predictors, or these trigger lines and confirmations in the algorithm. Because if we look, linear regression is going all over the place throughout this whole set. right? So on its own, doesn't do much. But we can start to see a little bit that, you know, REMA is kind of acting like something's going on here. But what's interesting is, again, the value doesn't matter, just on the correlation. These values don't matter that they're so low, it just matters that we are increasing. So we did a bunch of trigger lines again, but this trigger line got a confirmation from the rest of this information that, hey, there's data above my REMA. Linear regression is actually tracking the way we thought it would. Correlation, okay, so we've got a confirmation that there's a trend change. So it's there's a lot of stuff going on, but we tested all sorts of different.
On the right-hand side, is that an exemplar of a confirmation, or is that the only
This is this green line you're asking about?
Should there be more of those?
Yeah, should there be
Oh.
more?
We stopped at the first
Okay.
the first set. This was the first trigger that got a confirmation. We said, okay, we got a trend change. Right now is when we would want to re-fingerprint, and that may change all these scores coming after it, right? Because
Yeah.
we've got a new fingerprint. These guys are going to be rescored. They may very well keep increasing. We didn't take the experiment quite that far. We just want to say, hey, now we want to retune.
And re-fingerprinting means dumping all of your statistics and stars from scratch, or what does
It
that
means the
mean?
detector is going to take the data, which is interesting because we've got all this data that came in. It would just take that data, run it through the detector, say, here's your new fingerprint, here's your new threshold, what's the next packet? What's the next? And we did play around with it a little bit, seeing if we could do it on the fly. And we got some interesting results, but we've been not quite ready to, to talk about those. Some things we weren't even expecting. So, but yeah, in this set of experiment, we're looking at, Bruce looking at this. So I don't want to keep you guys too much longer. So we did the same set of experiments with a very small moving average window, and a very large linear regression window. Again, we got triggers that we can see. It took a much longer time to confirm that that trigger was correct. These are same sets of data. You can also see that the trigger that got confirmed in the gradual change came much later than the small and small. Right? When we went with a large moving average, which really is probably the optimal situation. If I was going to fingerprint a system, I'd start with a large moving average and a very small linear regression window. We want something to trigger very, very quickly, but we want to make sure that that we're absolutely sure that there's a trend change, so that long moving average becomes important. And we can see it's very similar to the first set of data. We get a trigger here around 4300, pack 4300 confirmation. Pretty much the same. This confirmation actually getting quicker because of the smaller linear regression. So it's hard to see that this guy getting a little bit quicker in the gradual. Large and large, same thing. We got the same trigger point, but it took longer to confirm that there was something going on. And again, we see a late trigger here, a much later trigger, and confirmation much later in the data set. So looking at all these together, you can see that these guys all triggered about the same time. It was just a matter of when they confirmed. And again, you can see the big difference here in the gradual change. You get an early trigger, late trigger, early, late, and you can see that that's because of the large linear regression window. Ultimately, for this set of data, which was data we used from DARPA, this kind of combination is what worked out best for us. So that's where we kind of ended with the research right now for that. We feel like that's a critical first step towards self-tuning, identifying if there's a new trend. We showed that we can numerically determine by using these different parameters of the algorithm that normal traffic is changing. And again, just to reiterate, this is not meant to be a standalone system. It's meant to be used in conjunction with a signature-based system as well. And what's that? Any additional questions?
They have kind of interested, like first brought up the encryption topic, that if you compare everything in plain text versus anything that's encrypted, seems like you get a lot more data in the plain text.
You know, I think that's that's probably true. Bob Edmonds, you probably know Bob. He was also working, but he was working with this project, but more on the hardware side. So he was actually building the box, the physical boxes. It was all software applications that we were just running. And he was playing a lot around with SSH, and I don't know what he found. He was throwing SSH traffic into the box to see what was coming out. So I'm not sure what results came out of that.
Have you thought about using, in addition to just every byte, having like a, so you have like a count for every byte, doing that on like every, whatever, byte, like, you know, words or...
Oh yeah, so do like an n gram instead of a 1 gram, do like a 3 gram or a 4 gram,
yeah,
5 gram.
if you got like a
We hadn't talked about it, but you know, that might be a way to kind of. Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting to see what kind of scores you got if you said, instead of saying cat, when we're talking about this, instead of saying CAT, take the word cat and give it a score. That would be a 3 gram byte distribution as opposed to a 1 gram byte distribution. Well, I guess it wouldn't be byte, but at that point it would be 3 byte distribution. So, but yeah, that's an interesting idea. We hadn't tried that.
What data did you use for this?
The data, we collect the data sets from DARPA, which is the defense
Research program.
Yeah. So they have sets of data that you can use, that you can play around with. So we know that what we did to make those trend changes was we had 100% of one data, boom, turn that data off, 100% of another data. That was the sharp change. So 2 different data sets. Then we kind of melded the gradual change at some percentage. We would kind of work in some of the second data set into the first.
Are you planning to use real life data from
Yeah, we looked at data sets. Actually, one of the things that Dr. Kim, before he left, was working on was actually trying to get data from here, from IT. I don't know how far he got with that. So we did talk about using different sets of data and just seeing what would happen, seeing what kind of combinations. Mainly with this, we just wanted to see if we could come up with tunable parameters that would work, and that was the case. So now we should be able to throw any data set at it, tune the parameters, and it should come up with triggers and confirmations just fine.
Do you think it would ever be deployable, like in a Windows system where you have Patch Tuesdays that come in and everybody goes crazy, or Blackboard?